My first experience in being feminized now seems so stereotypical to me, but at the time it was the most terrifying, humiliating, and haunting thing that could happen to anyone in the world. I had a sister who was 4 years older than me. We got along most of the time as kids, but as she moved on in years, she considered me a spoiled, messy brat of the first water. Good for nothing but annoying her in oh so many ways. I admit I enjoyed teasing her. I was probably looking for attention at first, but as I got a little older, I started to really try to push her buttons, and I had a smart mouth that made snide comments come easily to me. Since we were old enough and my sister was already babysitting other kids, my parents took to taking weekend trips, no doubt happy to get away from our bickering. My sister was always left in charge, but aside from yelling at me to clean up my messes, she was involved in her own life and spent most of her time in her room. One Saturday after my parents had left, I was kicking a soccer ball around in the living room and slammed the ball into a picture hung on the wall, shattering the glass and cutting the picture itself. The sound of the crash brought my sister out of her room and into a rage. Yelling that I was in huge trouble by ruining one of my mom's favorite pictures after being warned about playing ball in the house, she was also furious because she would get some of the blame. Saying I was nothing but a baby who couldn't understand English, she said she would treat me like one. Backing me into a corner, she grabbed me, turned me around, and began spanking me. She was bigger and older, and even though I squirmed and struggled, I couldn't get free. And her hand kept coming down on my bottom. Now she was angry not just at the picture breaking but listing all the other nasty things I'd done, reading her diary, dumping out her still wet laundry load, disrupting her sleepover party, telling on her to her parents, etc. As the list grew longer, my bottom got redder. I started to cry and begged her to stop, promising to behave from now on. I swore I wouldn't be a bratty little brother anymore. And at that, she did stop. She still held me down, but she didn't hit me again. Instead, in a laughing voice, she said something like, "That's right, you won't. I'm going to make sure you aren't a bratty little brother, and I know just how to do it. I'm going to make you my sweet little sister." I didn't understand that, but the tone of her voice got through to me. I asked her to let me up. She refused and told me that she was serious, and if I didn't do everything she told me for the rest of the weekend and be a good little girl, she would beat me again and make sure I got super punished for breaking the picture. I didn't say anything, just tried to stop crying. So she spanked me again, insisting that I promise to be a good girl. After a few more slaps, I did, and then she let me get up. She marched me in just my t-shirt up to her room, where she told me to take off the shirt while she found me something pretty. She rustled up a slip and ordered me to put it on. She turned to her closet and riffled through the back where her old clothes were. She whipped out a dress she had worn on Easter once and again, ordered me to step into it. I did, and with a zipping sound, I was wearing a silky smooth dress with puffy sleeves, a fancy collar, and a hem that came down above my knees. Next, I was told to sit down so she could do my hair, which was long, as was the style at that time. She combed it into bangs in the front and made 2 little scrunchy bunches held in with barrette. Then she told me to sit right there like a good girl while she got a few things. I sat there feeling the too tight panties on my bottom and the strange soft clinging of the slip and the dress on my chest. She came back with some makeup and told me to pout up my lips. I could smell the lipstick as she creamed it onto my lips. She had me blot them on a tissue just like I'd seen my mother do, and then she stood back, giggling. She told me what a pretty little prissy sissy sister I was now. Then she made me repeat that several times. She made me look into the mirror so I could see myself. Not such a spoiled boy anymore, are you? Wearing panties and a dress with your hair all done and red lipstick. You're going to pay for everything, little sissy, she told me, pulling me to my feet by my hair. She picked out little socks and after a lot of searching in the bottom of her closet came up with the shoes she had worn with the dress, what I know now were Mary Jane shoes with a little 2-inch heel. She told me to put them on and I did. Then I was forced to learn how to curtsy like a girl, holding my dress out and bobbing my head. I was made to walk back and forth and instructed to move my hips so my skirt swished. I was told to hold my hands out and up at the wrists, how to sit like a girl with my legs together, and she even insisted that I speak with a lisp in a high voice. All the while she laughed and smirked at my hot blush, which showed her how embarrassed I was at being made to dress and act like this. Eventually she had me stop and laid down the rules. Not only was I to wear whatever girly things she gave me, I was to act and walk like the prissy little sissy I was. She told me my new name, which was the feminine version of my boy name, and that I was to answer to that name only since I wasn't a boy anymore. If I disobeyed or tried to escape, she would beat me and tell everyone that I wore girls' clothes. She pointed out that I couldn't really run away unless I wanted the whole neighborhood to see me in my sissy clothes, and she was right. I would have died, so I obeyed her, as much as it shamed me to prance around like a girl. I felt trapped by her and all of the girl things she'd forced on me. I could feel the air under my dress, the wobble of the shiny shoes, the panties gripping me, the dress rustling, my hair pulled into the bunches, the taste of the lipstick. And there would be chores. Lots of chores which I had escaped from when I was a boy. First I had to clean up her room, put away all her clothes, take away dirty glasses and dishes, dust, change her bed and make it, and vacuum the rugs. Then I had to clean the bathrooms and the living room, leaving the broken picture. And do all the dishes in the kitchen. That took most of the day, with her usually sitting in whatever room I was working, except the bathrooms. When I was doing all the laundry, she came by as I was loading up her clothes and said she had an idea, a perfect idea. That had my stomach churning. She told me to finish up and come back to her room, which I knew meant trouble. When I finally had all the loads in and folded, I went back to her room where she was sitting on the bed, talking on the phone. She was smiling and laughing, and then when she saw me she said something quick with her hand over the mouthpiece and hung up. She told me to curtsy and come in, and when I did I saw she had a new outfit on the bed beside her. She told me that since I was being a good sissy girl she was going to let me wear a new outfit. I was told to take off my old stuff, and hang my slip and dress back up in her closet. Then it was a pair of pink tights and another dress, with lacy trim, and the shoes again. She did my lipstick again and this time spread some blush on my cheeks. She said now that I was a little more of a grown-up girl she would let me wear nail polish as well. I have sat down again at her desk and she painted my fingernails bright pink. Again it was mirror time. I looked at myself all sissed up with makeup and a dress and colored tights. I could see my pink nails when I moved my hands, but the worst was the way the dress was stretched tightly over my two big boobs. I couldn't stop looking at them, feeling the bra bite into my shoulders. My sister noticed and cupped my boobs from behind, telling me that now nobody would think I was anything but a girly sissy with such big tits. She made me say how much I liked them and what a lucky sissy I was to have developed so fast. Then the doorbell rang and she pushed me out and down the stairs and ordered me to open the door. I shook my head terrified at being seen, so she slapped me and told me she had guests coming. Quivering with shame and fear, I opened the door to see her best friends from next door standing in the doorway wide-eyed at the sissy in front of them. Sissy Peterkins watched his older sister Sally practicing her tap dancing in the back garden, and noticing he was intrigued, she offered to teach him some steps. Now the basic steps are, his sister demonstrates, and Peter tries his best to do them. "That's really good, Peter," she says after 10 minutes. "No, it isn't. I'm rubbish," he replies. "I just went thump thump thump. But when you do it, it's tap tap tap." "That's because you're not wearing tap shoes," she says, showing him the soles of her shoes. "But you can do the steps quite well for a beginner." She gets him to try something a little more difficult, and again he gets the hang of it after a few minutes. She's really impressed, but is less keen because when she does it, It sounds like tap dancing, and when he does it, it's just thump thump thump. Sally tells him to wait and disappears inside the house. Peter practices until she returns. "These are my old ones, so they might fit you," she says. Peter sits down and removes his trainers, before squeezing his foot inside the black tap shoe. "I think they're too small." "Take your socks off." "They're too thick," she suggests. Peter removes his sock and squeezes his foot inside. "Better?" his sister asks. "Kind of. But won't they rub without socks?" he replies as his bare skin rubs against the leather. "I'll get you some thin ones," his sister says before she runs indoors and returns within a minute. "Try these," she said, "they're called pop socks." Peter pulls the thin pop socks on before effortlessly sliding his feet inside the tap shoes. He fastens the buckles and stands up. And slowly goes through the basic steps his sister has taught him. A broad grin crosses his face as his feet finally produce the same tap 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 sound as his sister's, and they spend the next hour or so dancing on the patio. Their mother is used to the sound of her daughter tapping away in the backyard. But on hearing what sounds like 2 pairs of feet, goes to investigate. "Oh, it's you, Peter. I wondered who Sally was dancing with. I've been teaching him some steps and he's really good," Sally proudly states, before telling Peter to demonstrate what he's learned so far. "That is good, Peter," his mother replies. "Are those Sally's shoes?" she asks, looking at his feet. "Yes," Peter replied. "My own shoes just went thump thump thump," he explained, looking down at his feet. "These are much better," he adds, tapping them rhythmically on the decking. Their mother tells them that supper would be ready soon, so they have a last practice before going indoors. They have supper and mother says it's nice to see them doing something together for a change. As usual, Peter and Sally wash, dry and put away the dishes before wiping the dining table and kitchen worktops. Later, Peter joins his mother and sister in the sitting room where they watch TV, and sits himself in his usual chair. "You've still got Sally's tap shoes on, I see," his mother says, looking at his feet. "Oh, yeah," Peter replied. "I forgot. That's quite a high heel for a boy. Are they comfortable?" Peter put his foot on his knee and pays closer attention to the heel. "That's not high," he replied, looking at his mother's feet. "Yours are loads higher." "They're high for a boy," his mother reiterated, "but if you can dance in them, they mustn't be too high for you." Peter looked at his foot, clad in his sister's feminine tap shoe and thin white pop sock. He hadn't really given the style a second thought. But thinking about it, maybe they are a bit girly. "Hey Peter. You should come to dance class with me this Saturday," Sally interjects. Peter doesn't look overly keen. "It'll be full of girls though." "Well, yes. But boys can go too," Sally replies. "Just because it's all girls doesn't mean it's only girls," she adds. "Can he, Mum? Can he?" she asks. "It's up to you, Peter," their mother says. "If you want to go, then you can." She glances at his feet once more. "You certainly seem to have a talent for it." Over the next few days, Peter dons the pop socks and tap shoes and practices with his sister in the garden. Mother is happy that they finally have something in common, but isn't too sure about the Mary Jane-style tap shoes and white pop socks he seems happy enough to wear. The following week, Sally takes her brother to her tap dancing class and introduces him to Miss Baxter, the dance teacher. "Welcome, Peter. You want to learn to tap dance?" She smiles, he nods nervously. "It'll be nice having a boy here for once," she says, before asking him if he's had any classes before. "Sally's been teaching me some steps," Peter replies as he nervously glances around the room, feeling a little out of place. "And he's really good," Sally interjects proudly. "He picked up the basics in minutes." "Do you have any tap shoes?" the teacher asks. Peter unzipped his bag and removes his shoes. "I've been using these. They're my old ones." Sally explains, Mum said she'll buy him his own if he sticks at it. The teacher takes the shoes and inspects them. These are fine for now, she replies. How do you find dancing in heels? Okay, Peter replies honestly. They're not high, he reckoned. Well, let us get started. The teacher says, passing him his shoes. The changing room is through that door, so you go and get ready and we'll see you in a minute. Clutching his shoes, Peter walks across the floor towards the changing room as all the girls eye him with suspicion. The changing room is empty, so Peter gets himself ready for his first formal tap dancing class. He knows he's in female territory and as such, is clearly self-conscious as he steps out into the studio. A gabble of sniggers echoed around the studio as he noisily walks in his tap shoes towards his sister, whose grinning face is as welcoming as ever. You look great, Peter, she says, looking him up and down before glancing around the class nervously. Peter blushes and looks down at himself, clad in the same black leotard and short skirt that Sally and all the other girls wear. He nervously looks around the studio as he feels the eyes of each and every one of them focus on him. Some giggle and point, some glance and whisper, whilst others just stand and stare. He knows he's out of place, and they know it too. He looks back at Sally, who smiles reassuringly. Now girls, we're here to dance and not snigger, the teacher states loudly before getting them all in lines to do their warm-up and stretching exercises. Once the class gets underway, Peter loses his inhibitions and tries his best to keep up. Miss Baxter claps out the timing as she shouts instructions such as on the beat, and with grace, Lauren. Peter is chuffed as she occasionally shouts, very good, Peter. One wall of the studio is one big mirror in which Peter could see the entire class, dancing away in 4 long rows. All are dressed identically and he is definitely one of them. Seemingly all of the older girls have their hair tied tightly in a bun, whereas bunches are common on those his own age or younger. He becomes conscious of his own mopped hair that just flops up and down, much like his exceedingly short skirt. 1, 2, 3, on the beat, 2, 3, 4. Good, 2, 3, 4, the teacher claps. The sound of some 20 to 30 pairs of feet, all tapping away in near-perfect rhythm, fills his senses. He closed his eyes for a moment and just danced and listened to the sound. This is awesome, he thought as he opened his eyes. He looked at the reflection of the entire class and for a brief moment he wondered, which one's me? 2, 3, on the beat, 2, 3, 4. Good, 2, 3. The teacher continued as she paced up and down. The only thing that set him apart from all these girls was his white knee-high pop socks, they all wore tights, and his hair. Their skirts flicked up way beyond the knicker line just as his did. If it wasn't for his leotard, he and all the other girls would be flashing their underwear at the end of every 4th bar. He knew he should feel more embarrassed than he does in his short bouncy skirt, but seeing as this is part and parcel of a tap dancing class, it's fine. 2, 3, on the beat, 2, 3, good, the teacher claps as Peter tries to keep up. He looks at his feet and listens to the beat, making sure he taps in time. His short bouncy skirt sways this way and that and he wonders why boys don't wear shorts instead. He looked back to the mirror and took in the entire scene of dancing feet and bouncing skirts once more. He imagined he'd look out of place if he was the only one not wearing a skirt. On the beat, Peter. Good. 3, for the dance, teacher clapped, snapping him out of his thoughts. 3, 4. Use your arms, Carol, 4. It's not river dance, 4. Like me, 3, 4. Good, Peter. She went on. Peter did feel very self-conscious being the only boy in a room full of girls, but every time he glanced in the mirror he knew he didn't stand out too much. He was only one small part of a tap dancing troupe and was enjoying every minute of it. Once the class is over, a gabble of girls encircled Peter and tell him he was really good, for a boy, and other such misandrous compliments. The teacher claps her hands loudly and tells the girls to stop chatting and go and change. I have another class after this one, she states. The girls disperse and Miss Baxter asks Peter if he's enjoyed his first class. Yes, miss, he replies, glancing at his sister. Well, I think you're not only very talented, but you're also a very brave boy. So I'm more than happy for you to return next week, she smiles. Yes, Sally exclaims as her brother says thank you and smiles appreciatively. You don't mind joining in a class full of girls? The teacher asked. No, miss, he replied, looking down at his costume. I mean, I felt a bit silly at first, but after a while it was okay, he explained. Normally boys wear shorts or track pants, Sally said. But there was only this in the changing room and I thought. Peter replied, bashfully glancing at the other girls, everyone else is wearing one, he adds, shyly thumbing the hem of his skirt. The teacher smiled the broadest of grins. I think there's been a bit of a mix-up. A full-on blush crossed Peter's face as he realizes his error. Miss Baxter explains that she only expected him to change his shoes. You didn't have to change your clothes too. You mean? I wasn't supposed to wear this, he asked as the grinning teacher shook her head. Peter cast his mind back to when he was sent to the changing room. He did think he'd only be changing his footwear, but when he saw the leotard hanging there, he thought Mrs. Baxter must have meant that he had to change his clothes too. Everyone else wore a black leotard and tiny skirt, and that's exactly what was waiting for him in the changing room. Had he realized that it was just left there, rather than put there for him, he'd have only changed his shoes. Why does hindsight always come too late? Peter glumly thought as he looked down at himself. Sorry, he said. Oh, there's no need to apologize, Peter. You've done nothing wrong, the teacher reassures. Their attention is drawn by a group of girls leaving and waving bye-bye specifically to Peter. He blushes, not knowing what to make of it, teasing or friendly. Who can tell? Peter looks at his sister, then his reflection. I'm such an idiot, he moans. Bye Peter echoes across the studio once more. Peter looks for the source of the sound and waves shyly in the general direction of the door. He looks back at himself in the mirror, then to his sister. You could have said something. When? Sally asks. When I came out. After a pause, she replies, I said you looked nice. But you could have said. Peter began. Hey, Sally. A voice called from across the room. Is your brother coming next week? Think so, Sally replies, before turning back to her brother. I'm sorry, Peter. I figured it was best to pretend it was normal. Otherwise, I'd have embarrassed you. I think your sister did the right thing, Peter. Miss Baxter says, drawing attention to your error would have made you feel 10 times more self-conscious than you looked, she explained. But judging by the way the girls have acted towards you, being a boy, she says, knowing how mean they can be, I think they're quite impressed. How do you mean? Well, on the rare occasion a boy joins, they tend to act cocky and show off. As if they're somehow better than the girls. You know what boys can be like. Peter listens and agrees. So far. Thing is, most girls don't stand for that and soon bring them down to size. You know what girls are like. She steps around him and looks him up and down, from his low-heeled black Mary Janes and white knee-high pop socks. His pale white legs and short black circle skirt. His short-sleeved leotard and blonde moppy hair. I think by joining the class as you did and not being all boyish is the best thing you could have done. Miss Baxter tells him. By Pete, another voice calls. See what I mean? The girls have already accepted you. Miss Baxter smiles. Although I'm sure you'd rather wear shorts next week, I think it would be wise to wear the leotard again. She smiles as she places her hands on his shoulders, hoping to reassure him. I think you should too, Sally says. You were worried that you wouldn't fit in and you don't look silly at all. I don't know. Peter sighed, looking down at himself again. I figured that boys don't come because they didn't want to wear a skirt. But when we were dancing, I kept looking at us all in the mirror and it just seemed right, he explained. But I just feel like an idiot now, he blushed. Well, it's an easy mistake to make, Peter, Sally said, and Miss Baxter's right. I think the girls have warmed to you because… She paused, because they see you as one of us. Not just another boy. But it was a mistake. But they don't know that, Sally replied. Your sister's right, Peter. As far as the others know, you decided to wear the same as them in order to fit in. And it seems to have worked. Miss Baxter explains. Now I can't tell you what to wear, she says, glancing down at his feminine attire once more. If you want to bring some shorts next week, that's fine. But there'll be a leotard and skirt waiting, then you can choose either way. She smiles. Now why don't you two run along? I'll see you both next week, I hope. Peter returns to the changing room and leaves the skirt and leotard as he found them. It all seemed so innocent when he removed them from the hook an hour ago, just as the tap shoes he's been wearing seem innocent enough. To him at least. It doesn't matter as long as they're tap shoes, he thought as he carefully wound his pop socks around his outstretched fingers, and put them with the tap shoes in his bag. Back in his own clothes, he exits the changing room and joins his sister. They leave the studio and walk around the block to the car park where their mother should be waiting. Another couple of girls from the tap dancing class wave a greeting to Peter as they climb into their parents' car. Shyly he waves back and comments that they haven't changed out of their dance gear. Lots of them don't, Sally replied. I think the skirts are a bit short for streetwear, she adds, glancing around the car park. No sign of Mum, she observes, before suggesting they wait on the wall. After a brief silence, and sensing that her brother is still feeling a little embarrassed, she asks. So, apart from the mix-up, did you enjoy it? Yeah, he replied. I enjoyed it right up until I realized that I wasn't supposed to wear the leotard that was hanging in the changing room. Sally grinned the broadest of grins. So, you enjoyed it all the way from the beginning to the end? Peter glumly nodded. That's great, she said. You could have said something at the beginning though, he replied. I know. But I didn't know how to say it, Sally replied. Nobody else said anything, so I thought it best not to say anything either. I honestly thought that's what we wore, Peter stated, trying to convince himself that it wasn't my fault. Well, I'm glad you did, Sally replied. I was a bit worried how they'd react with a new boy joining. But you got off scot-free. What are they normally like? He asked. Normally they're fine if it's just girls. But a few months ago a boy joined and nobody was nice to him. They'd stare and whisper and gossip about him. Then push him over when Miss Baxter wasn't looking, and claim he slipped or fell. He stopped coming after a few weeks, Sally told him. But he did seem to think he was better than us girls just because he was a boy, till we put him in his place. Peter gulped at we put him in his place, yet was thankful he'd not been treated that way, so far. You think I should wear the same thing next week then? He asked as the words "they're fine if it's just girls" rattled around his skull. Yes. I think you should. But it's up to you, Sally replies. Here's Mum, she said, jumping off the wall. Did you enjoy yourself, Peter? His mother asked as he climbed onto the back seat. He told her he did, and Sally told her how impressed Miss Baxter was with his dancing, and that he could come back next week. Oh, that's good, his mother replied. Although it'll be a while before I can afford to get you some tap shoes of your own. And some dance wear, she added. That's okay, Peter replied. I've got Sally's shoes and… He cut himself short, not sure if he should tell his mother about the mix-up in the changing room. You don't mind wearing girls' shoes for now? His mother asked. I mean, I would buy you some of your own, but if you're going to give up after a couple of months it'll be a waste of money, she explained. No, they're fine, I guess, he replied. Sally looked back at her brother and cast him a broad grin. I don't think he minds wearing girls' shoes. He accidentally wore a leotard and skirt too, and you didn't mind that, did you? She giggled. Not until I realized I wasn't supposed to wear it. He blushed. I just thought that's what we were supposed to wear. What's this? Their mother asked, wondering if she'd heard correctly. Between them, they explained the mistake and the fact that everybody was okay with it. Sally said none of the girls teased him and added that the teacher said he could wear it again next week if he doesn't want to wear shorts. His mother quizzed him on why he wouldn't want to wear shorts, and after a brief pause for thought, he explained. Well, I'm the only boy and don't want to stand out that much. Plus, shorts won't bounce around like the skirts do. His mother glanced at her daughter. They shared a grin before she glanced at her son through the rear-view mirror. Well, if it makes you feel more comfortable blending in with a group of girls, she says, visualizing Peter and Sally dancing side by side, black clackety shoes, white tights, matching black leotards, and bouncy little skirts. If it doesn't bother him, then it shouldn't bother her, his mother thought. When they arrive home, their mother makes them a sandwich each along with a glass of fizzy pop. It's a sunny day, so they eat in the garden, and Sally suggests they should practice some more. We could show Mum what we learned today, she adds. Seeing as Mum pays for our classes. Okay, Peter replies. Sally glances at her mother, then to her brother before suggesting, I've got a spare leotard and skirt if you want. She pauses as a look of reluctance sweeps her brother's face. I mean, you'll get too warm in your pants and sweatshirt, she states, looking up at the beating sun, and it'll be better if we both look the part, she adds. Don't you think, Mum? Their mother has been intrigued since they revealed that Peter had taken the entire class dressed just like all the other girls and, feeling like she's missed out, she says, that's a very good idea. 10 minutes later, Sally and very sheepish Peter step out through the patio doors. Sally wears her black leotard with the Betty Baxter School of Dance logo on, with a voile wrap skirt. Whilst Peter wears a pale blue leotard and a matching skirt. Well, look at you, their mother smiles. Peter looks down at himself, gulps, and smiles back. If I'd known you looked that good in a skirt, I'd have bought you one years ago, his mother teases before they go through some of the basic routines. She watches for 10 or 15 minutes and is clearly impressed. You are very good, Peter, considering you've only had one lesson, his mother says as they stop for a breather. Well, Sally has given me lessons too, he replies, much to his sister's delight. Would you like more drinks? It looks like very thirsty work. Mother asks as she goes to refill the pitcher. When she returns, they're sat at the patio table eagerly chattering. It's hard to believe one of these gossiping girls is my son, she grins as she refills their glasses. Peter blushes but doesn't seem offended. He looks down at himself and straightens his leg, pointing his toes. He's blatantly aware that he looks like a girl as he observes his short skirt, thin legs, pop socks, and shoes. Oh no, he says in a sulky voice, lifting his knee and running his fingers down his shin. What? His mother says, looking at his leg. Oh, it's just a ladder, she says. We'll get you some more. He quizzes his mother, who explains that pop socks are very delicate and don't last very long. Fortunately they're cheap, so I'll get you some more before next week, she smiles as she pushes her fingers through his hair. Unless you'd prefer tights, his mother suggested. I guess most of the other girls wear tights. You can borrow some of mine if you want. Sally offers. Peter looks at his sister's legs, clad in white tights which appear much thicker than his pop socks. Aren't they warm? He asks. Not really, Sally replies as she puts her foot on the bench and runs her hand over her stockinged leg. They're nicer than pop socks, she adds. With a little prompt from their mother, Peter follows his sister to her room where she roots out a pair of tights for him. She lifts her skirt to show him they should go under his leotard. I know, he blushes. She asks him if he knows how to put tights on, before demonstrating how to gather them up to the toe and to pull them on carefully, otherwise you'll ladder them. Peter goes to his room and strips down to his underpants. He carefully pulls on the tights, followed by his leotard and skirt before he finally slides his stockinged feet into the tap shoes. His mother is the first to see him and she tells him he looks sweet. His sister asks him how they feel. Well, they are a bit strange. But quite nice, I guess, he replies, looking down at himself. I'll buy you some of your own for next week, his mother suggests. Aren't they expensive? Peter asked. Not at all, his mother smiled. The shoes are, but we can easily afford a leotard and some tights. Peter does feel a little embarrassed being dressed as a girl. But he did feel like he did fit in at his first tap class. And as his sister and the dance teacher said, the other girls accepted him because he wasn't dressed as a boy. Okay. Peter timidly said. The following Saturday, Peter and his sister go to their tap class and Peter attends wearing his sister's old tap shoes and his own leotard, circle skirt, and tights. He was self-conscious at first, but the girls didn't seem at all bothered. In fact, half of them said it was nice to see him back, which left Peter feeling warm inside. The class is more or less the same, starting with a warm-up and stretching, followed by a variety of basic routines. Miss Baxter claps the timing and shouts instructions, frequently reminding Peter to concentrate on keeping his head still. It's easier said than done when one's feet are tapping away, but he tries his best. After a short break, Miss Baxter drags a very large bag from the storeroom. Right girls, she announces, pulling the bag open. We'll do some pom-pom practice for the last half hour. So if you each grab a pair, we'll get started. Pom-poms? Peter quizzes as he and Sally approach what looks like a huge pile of tinsel. Yes, pom-poms. Sally grins. Back in line, Peter looks at the reflection of the 4 rows of dancing girls, each holding a pair of big pom-poms. Now follow my lead, girls, Miss Baxter says, before pressing play in the cassette player. Peter soon realizes that dancing with pom-poms is harder than it looks. Miss Baxter walks over and gives him some one-to-one tuition. Follow my lead, Peter, and don't forget about your feet, she says. He tries to keep up but struggles to do one thing with his feet and another with his arms. Concentrate on the steps but don't forget about your arms, she reminds him. Head up, Peter. And remember, the mirror is your friend. Peter knows he has a habit of looking down. He looks straight ahead at his own reflection, one of many girls in a bouncy skirt, waving his pom-poms as best he can. He drops his head again to concentrate on his footwork, but Miss Baxter shouts, "Head up, Peter." After the pom-pom practice, Peter confesses to Sally that was really hard. Once the class is over, Miss Baxter approaches Peter and says she's pleased he decided to return and wanted to double-check that he was happy dressing as a girl. It makes sense, Peter replied, before telling her that his mother had bought him his own leotard, skirt, and tights. Oh. Mrs. Baxter seemed surprised. I thought you'd worn the one I'd left in the changing room for you, she said. Peter bashfully shook his head. As long as you're happy, I'm happy. Just don't get offended if I forget you're a boy and refer to the whole class as girls, which I do tend to do. She smiled. Peter felt himself blushing and said it was okay. Miss Baxter then offered him some constructive criticism. Whilst your footwork is excellent, you need to be more aware of your upper body. Your head and arms are all over the place, so you need to concentrate on being graceful as well as rhythmic. I know. I can't help but look at my feet half the time, he replies. Yes, I noticed. But remember, you can see your feet perfectly well in the mirror, she advises. Along with the rest of your body. Grace is everything, so if you're looking directly ahead, you're halfway to being graceful. Okay. I think part of the problem is that you're a little bit scared of your reflection. Miss Baxter suggests. The best advice I can give you is, don't be shy when you look in the mirror and see a girl reflected instead of a boy. Be proud and keep that head up. The sound of heels on parquet grabbed both Peter and Miss Baxter's attention. Hi, Peter. How was class? His mother asked. Good. He sheepishly replied. I need to work on being more graceful. Miss Baxter and Peter's mother were already acquainted. They greeted each other before Peter's mother asked how he was getting on. "Very well," Miss Baxter replied. "You have two very talented children," she complimented. "Thank you," his mother replied bashfully. She told Peter to find his sister and then get changed, before turning back to Miss Baxter. "I just wanted to check he was getting on okay and that you're happy to have a boy in amongst all these girls," she said, glancing around and wondering which was her son, then spotting him chatting with a group of girls. "He seems to be getting on fine. Leaps and bounds as far as his dancing is concerned," Miss Baxter replied. "And he seems to be fitting in perfectly with the girls," she said. "I hope so," his mother replied, glancing around too. "He's the only boy, I guess?" "Yes," Miss Baxter replied. "It's a pity not many boys attend, and those who do don't stay long," she said with a hint of reluctance. "Maybe if they tried to fit in as Peter does, it'd be different." "Yes," his mother said. After a brief silence, Miss Baxter asked, "So, how do you feel about Peter attending?" She paused. "I mean, attending dressed as a girl." "Well, it's a little unusual. But as long as he's happy," she replies. "It's nice he and Sally have got something in common for once." "And you're happy for him to attend as one of the girls?" Miss Baxter asked. "Of course. I wouldn't have bought him a leotard and skirt if I wasn't," his mother replied, trying to spot both her son and daughter amongst the various groups of girls. All of them are identical in their black tap shoes, white tights, black leotards, and tiny flared skirts. How does she tell them apart, she thought before spotting Peter and Sally by the changing rooms, both looking just like the other girls, all legs and leotards. He's been practicing at home a fair bit. "Have you any advice on where he can improve? He seems a little reluctant to work with the mirror," Miss Baxter adds. "I think seeing himself dressed as a girl is a little off-putting. He keeps dropping his head, then his arms go all akimbo." "Well, I suppose it'll take a little getting used to. But he does seem comfortable enough," his mother replies. "I've even started wondering what to do with his hair. He really needs a trim, but I'm thinking I should let it grow a little more, then he could tie it up in bunches." She chuckled, not sure if she was joking or not. My sister had got a job working in the school office and found it very useful when my classes were getting set up. Sis put most of all my classes in rooms close to hers or some of the other girls that knew me. She also got me out of gym class by telling everyone I had breathing problems and could not do the gym at all, at least that's what she told me. I was living as a girl almost 90% of the time. And the other 10% was when I was around my mom, but I still wore nylons. There were some times after school that Kathy and Sis would pick me up at school and drive me home, or we would go to Kathy's house and I would do her chores while they watched. Some days after school, as soon as I got into the car, they would drive to a nearby park and they would have me change into a petticoat and dress for the ride home. I don't know who was more excited about the dressing up, Kathy and Sis or I, but we sure had a wonderful time. One day after school we went to Kathy's house. A few of her girlfriends came over to visit too. All of the girls changed their clothes in Kathy's room. They said for me to start cleaning up the kitchen and living room while they were changing. When they were finished, they came into the living room and said I could start cleaning the bedrooms, but to start in Kathy's room first while they visited. They closed the door but left it open just a crack. I could hear them a little out in the other room, but could not make out what they were saying. So anyway, I looked around her room. I really didn't know where to start. There were tops and skirts all lying about, some on a chair, some on the floor. Finally, I started by picking up the skirts and hanging them in her closet. I saw a pretty lavender print full skirt with 3 tiers of ruffles. It was made of a thin polyester material, and as I picked it up I could feel the material, it was so silky. I decided to try it on. So off with my slacks and loafers, and I pulled on the skirt. It was a little snug at the top, so I zipped it up and left the button unbuttoned at the top. I twirled around a bit admiring myself in her dresser mirror. Then I went to her closet and sorted through her clothes looking for a nice top to wear. Instead, I saw away in the back of the closet, a short white fluffy petticoat. I pulled at it till it fell to the floor, then I stepped into it, pulling it up under the skirt. It filled my skirt out and felt so wonderful swishing about the room. I continued hanging up the rest of the clothes while I wiggled about the room. I saw a white silky blouse that was laying on a chair. So, I held it up and it looked close to my size and put it on and tucked the top into the skirt, and as I looked at myself in the mirror, I could see the girl coming out in me again. As I continued cleaning up her room, I kept hearing giggles from outside the door. I even went to the door and peeked out once, but I didn't see anyone. So, I went back to my cleaning. Then, Sis knocked on the door and came in to see how I was doing. She looked shocked as she came in. She said, "You are supposed to be cleaning in here, not trying on Kathy's clothes." I told her that I just wanted to have some fun and tried on a skirt that was on the floor. Sis opened the door wider and called for Kathy. Kathy came in and with a stern voice said, "Hey, you got my skirt and one of my blouses on." Then her face turned to a small grin and she said, "You look so sweet and pretty wearing everything though." Kathy said, "I see you are also wearing a petty slip too." She said that the petticoat was her mom's that she didn't wear anymore, so she put it in her closet just yesterday and hoped that while I was in her room cleaning, I would snoop and find it hanging in her closet and try it on. This was sounding more like a planned afternoon to me, but I just put it out of my mind. I was having too much fun and I really didn't care if it was planned or not. I could see that both girls were trying very hard to hold back their giggles as they asked me to twirl around a few times so they could get a good look at me. Sis grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the room, dragging me, struggling into the hall. As she did, Kathy yelled out, "Here comes our new sissy girl." Sis shoved me all the way into the middle of the living room. All the girls were laughing as I entered the room. Then they all burst into loud screams of laughter. After 15 minutes or so, they kinda calmed down to just a smile and a few giggles. Sis said they all saw me at school and thought I was wearing girls' clothes. They asked Kathy and she told them what happened this summer and that I was wearing girls' panties and nylons under the uniform too. They didn't believe Kathy, so they asked if they could come and see for themselves. So Kathy and Sis got together and planned this after-school event. They both knew that when I went to Kathy's room to clean up and I saw all the clothes laying about the room that I would do as I always have. Yep. I went to snooping in her drawers and closet and I would put something on. Sis said she peeked in on me and watched to make sure I was doing it. She said after she saw me in the skirt and petticoat, she went out and told the other girls that I took the bait all the way. And now that we have shown our guests what you like to do at home, there's gonna be 5 more girls that know about you now. Kathy told them how I got off for them, so they wanted me to do it for them too. So I put on a show for them. They promised to keep it a secret if I would dress up for them and help at their houses cleaning too. That day we played a game called Twister. It's a game where there is a lot of close contact with everyone. I was in some very weird poses. They all patted and pulled at my petticoat and skirt as we played. Nathaniel was an average young man. However, he loved to be a rebel. In fact, he maybe loved to rebel a little too much. Far too much so for his mother's liking. Nathaniel's mother, Julie, was a single parent, who was totally at the end of her tether. She needed to put an end to Nathaniel's rebellious ways once and for all. One day, when Nathaniel's mother has had enough, she decided to plot something that would finally put an end to Nathaniel's rebellious ways. She decided that she was going to turn Nathaniel back into a docile baby boy. A docile baby boy that she, oh so much missed. Nathaniel's mother had found out about this place to help out single parents with rebellious offspring. Oh my! Could this be what I have been looking for? Nathaniel's mother smiled as she typed away to fill out the necessary stuff. Nathaniel's mother then got on the phone to speak with a representative. She booked an appointment and date. "Thank you so much," said Nathaniel's mother, with such joy. She was overjoyed that she was finally going to end Nathaniel's errant ways, once and for all. "You will not regret this, Miss Valentine," the rep said as she hung up. Nathaniel's mother was so excited and glittered with glee. She was finally going to have her good little boy back, and they would be closer than ever. One day Nathaniel came home from school. Finally, he was home for the winter break. Yes! Finally, winter break, he yelled with much enjoyment. His mother greeted Nathaniel with a smile. "Aren't you a happy camper?" Nathaniel smiled. "Yeah, I will finally get some stuff done that I want to do, and maybe even hang with some friends." Nathaniel's mother smiled. "That is good, dear. I have a little surprise for you," she continued, "however it is not going to be here until tomorrow. In the meantime, I will let you wonder as to what it is going to be." This time her smile was a little more cunning. Nathaniel continued to pester his mother as to what the surprise was. He gasped. "Come on. Tell me," he pleaded, wanting to know more than anything. However, there was no way on heaven's earth that she was going to let on. Nathaniel sat in his room wondering what this surprise was going to be. Or, "I wanna know, Nathaniel. Maybe it is a computer game." Nathaniel was now starting to throw little tantrums. This was all because his mother would not tell him what the surprise was. It was common practice for Nathaniel to throw tantrums when he did not get his own way. He was so annoyed with his mother for keeping him in suspense. However, eventually, he knew he was fighting a losing battle. He sighed, and just gave up. This was not before he had rudely called his mother a few choice names. Early, the next morning Nathaniel saw a big blue truck out in the driveway of his house. He overheard his mother talking to someone in the other room. Slowly but surely he approached the door to listen in. Nathaniel could hear the despair of his mother's voice. "He is so unruly, he never respects me, he always does whatever he wants with no consideration to others, and I am sick and tired of it." Nathaniel's mother continued. "I so miss the sweet little boy I used to have, that did as he was told. I would do everything to make sure I could be the best mother in the world." Suddenly Nathaniel heard another voice. "Well, Miss Valentine, we offer a way to get your boy back, and maybe if you chose to do so, we can turn him into a sweet little girl." Nathaniel's mother gasped and had an excited tone in her voice. "A girl. You can do that these days. I kinda would have loved a baby girl." Nathaniel gasped. He covered his mouth as he heard someone approaching. "Oh no," he whispered. Nathaniel tried to make a dash for it. However, it was a little too late. Someone grabbed his shorts and dragged him into the room. "Let me go," he shouted as he desperately tried to scurry away. Nathaniel's mother laughed as she saw her son struggle. Finally, Nathaniel was getting his comeuppance. Nathaniel suddenly stopped and turned over. Recklessly he slammed his fist into the woman's leg. What a silly, selfish, spoilt boy Nathaniel is. A total embarrassment to his poor long-suffering mother. Nathaniel's mother did not bring him up to lash out. Especially not on women. Nathaniel needs to be taught a lesson once and for all. As Nathaniel's mother gasped, the woman visitor jumped up and landed on him, making Nathaniel lose his breath. "Damn it, "You wretched boy. How dare you strike me," she said as she got up and then pulled a pill out of her handbag. With his mother's help, they finally got Nathaniel to take the pill. Nathaniel tried to cough the pill back up, but it did not work. Nathaniel was now doomed. Suddenly Nathaniel felt numb. He couldn't move, as his body was unresponsive. "There, that will keep that wretched boy on the ground till we need him to move," said the woman visitor. Nathaniel's mother was a little shaken but knew this had to be done. Nathaniel's behavior was out of control. So this was all for his own good. Nathaniel started to cry. All his big talk had now finally subsided. Both Nathaniel's mother and the woman visitor laughed. "See, he's just a little baby, who needs to be taken care of." They both smirked. Nathaniel's mother was a little shaken. However, she couldn't wait till he was her new baby girl. Nathaniel woke up in a bed. His world now was soft and fluffy, and his body was barely able to move. His hands and feet had mittens and booties on them. He couldn't grab anything or even get upright. His speech was muffled by a pacifier. He spat it out, but a robot arm put it back in. He did it again. But then it again put it back in, and a shock shot up his arm. Nathaniel squealed in pain. He stopped and looked around. His vision was nearsighted and unfocused. He could see himself. He was in a baby's dress, with mittens and booties. He tried to raise his arm. But his muscles were barely able to move his fingers. He just gave up and passed out again. "Sweetie? Sweetie." He woke back up who knows how much later, to see his mom there. Nathaniel gently smiled and tried to reach for her. She smiled back and held his hand. "I know this is sudden, but I missed the sweet little baby I had, and I just wanted that back." Suddenly Nathaniel had a surge of strength. He got up and pushed his mom away, trying to get out of the room. Suddenly another surge of electricity shot through his body. Nathaniel screamed in pain and fell to the ground. Nathaniel's mother wanted to cry, but had to suck it up. She didn't like to see her baby in so much pain. Nathaniel's mother started to wonder just what she has done. The moral of the story is: be careful what you wish for. After arriving at his Aunt May and Uncle Jax's place, Simon finds out his cousin Sarah used to wet the bed nearly into adulthood. Her diapers, plastic pants, and other things are still in her bedroom where Simon is sleeping for the summer. Sunday night at bedtime, Simon is lying in bed and having some trouble sleeping. He remembers being 4 and 5 years old and occasionally being put back in diapers overnight for bedwetting. Simon finds it hard not to wonder what it would be like to wear diapers and plastic pants as an adult 27 years old. He reasons it would be risky to put them on and soon is fast asleep. In the morning, the Ballard family is up early and Simon can hear them up before him. Uncle Jack knocks on his door and said goodbye to Simon. He kisses his wife and leaves for his 1-month-long out-of-town job. Aunt May knocks at Simon's door at 8 p.m. saying breakfast is ready. Simon gets up and reports to breakfast wearing his pajamas. "I made pancakes and pork sausages," Aunt May said. "I hope you enjoy breakfast with a glass of orange juice." Aunt May talks about how she has been retired for several years and how she spends her time keeping the home clean and enjoying life. Simon gives Aunt May a ride in his car. They stop at a local park and take a long walk for exercise. After some shopping, the two of them have lunch. May needed some new bath towels and washcloths for the home. When back at home, there are some chores to do. Simon gladly helps by doing the dusting and sweeping the floors. They talk about how lucky Simon is to have got a job in the present climate, even if it's not starting got another 3 months. The day passes quickly. Aunt May is happy to have the company. May takes her shower in the morning, but Simon is used to showering a couple of hours before bedtime. It is Monday night. Simon uses the hall bathroom to shower at 9 p.m. He likes to go to bed by midnight and usually 11:30 p.m. after the news. After his shower, Simon watches television with Aunt May. They both go to bed after the nightly news at 11:30 p.m. Simon usually sleeps with his door closed at home, so he does this at Aunt May's. Aunt May leaves her door open. She likes it better this way. Once again, while lying in bed, Simon has thoughts of what it would be like to wear a diaper and plastic pants again at his age. He decides that the risk of trying this is less with Uncle Jack gone. Simon waits till midnight, then gets up to use the bathroom. He concludes Aunt May must be asleep by now. Simon puts the lamp on low, leaving only a dim light. Simon is nervous but takes one of the attend's diapers off the shelf and opens it up. It is an adult small with 6 blue tapes and plastic outside. The inside is soft and fluffy, as Simon concludes one diaper would not be missed. He finds a pair of milky white plastic pants and puts them on the bed. Simon drops his pajama bottoms and briefs and lays on the diaper he put on his bed. He pulls the diaper up between his legs and tapes it on without much trouble. The diaper is thick and makes a crinkly sound. Simon puts his feet in the small holes of the plastic pants and pulls them up and over his diaper. He puts his pajama bottoms back on to lay down for a short time. Not realizing how tired he is, Simon falls asleep about 1 a.m. Simon wakes up at 8 a.m. after a sound sleep. He forgets he is wearing diapers and plastic pants under his pajamas. Still under the covers, Simon rolls over and hears the crinkling sound of his diaper and plastic pants. Oh no, he realizes he fell asleep without taking his diaper off. Suddenly there is a knock on Simon's bedroom door and it is Aunt May. Oh no. Simon hopes she does not open the door and come into his room. Just then the bedroom door is opened and Aunt May walks in. I hope you had a good night's rest, sweetie, Aunt May said. Today is Tuesday and I always wash the bed sheets and remake the beds. Simon is more than nervous at this point and still under the covers. Aunt May goes over and opens the drapes to let the sun in. She walks right over to the bed and pulls the blanket and sheet down. Time to get up and have breakfast, sweetie, she said with a smile. Simon stands up and makes a crinkling sound. Not only that, he has a bulky padded bottom that is noticeable. He is red-faced as Aunt May gives him a long look. I thought you said you have not wet the bed since you were 5 years old, Aunt May said. You are wearing Sarah's diapers and plastic panties, young man. Aunt May suddenly pulls down Simon's pajamas to reveal his diapers and plastic panties she knew he had put on. Simon is real embarrassed and his face is beet red. He does not know what to say to Aunt May. That is right, I don't wet the bed, Simon insisted. I just put these on for fun last night and fell asleep. I don't think a grown man 27 years old would put on diapers and plastic panties if he did not wet the bed, Aunt May said, shaking her head in disbelief. Go to the dining room for breakfast if you are not wet. No, Auntie, I am not wet, but I do need to take this diaper off first, Simon insisted, stepping out of his pajama bottoms. I am not sure what to do about this, but for now keep those diapers and plastic panties on, Aunt May said sternly.
Hell are you talking about? Maggie looked up at the man in an expensive-looking suit and tie standing next to her table. He looked awkwardly out of place among the casually dressed students in the university cafeteria. "Your name is Maggie, is it not?" the stranger repeated. "Yeah, and..." The man sighed. "Look, this is a bit odd, but this is you, isn't it?" He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his jacket, unfolded it and put it down on the table next to Maggie's half-finished sandwich. It was a pencil sketch of her. "Damn, that's you," Christopher said. He was sitting across the table from Maggie. Maggie had to admit that the sketch looked remarkably like her. "Okay," she said, "that's me. And if you have a modeling offer or something like that, take a hike." Christopher was still looking at the sketch. "This is really good," he said. "When did you pose for it?" "She didn't," the stranger said dryly. "This sketch is more than 20 years old." "Okay," Maggie said cautiously, "I'm interested." "Keep going." The stranger sat down. "I suppose introductions are in order. My name is Rhett Moreau and I work for the law firm of Mathis and Mayhew." "So you're a lawyer?" Mr. Moreau nodded. "Anne?" Maggie made a beckoning gesture. "Our firm mostly handle estate law. And, if you pass certain tests, you may be the heir to the remaining estate of Dr. Charlie Stefanova." "But what has that got to do with a 20-year-old sketch of me?" Mr. Moreau adjusted his tie before continuing. "Dr. Stefanova's will included strict instructions that we were to wait until this year before trying to find you. All we had to work with was this sketch and your first name." "Well, that and the control questions." Maggie was confused. "I don't know anybody called Charlie Stefanova. I've never even heard of the guy." Dr. Stefanova was a woman. She insisted on Charlie although her given name was Charlotte. "Charlotte?" Maggie's head snapped up. "Do you have a picture of her?" she asked urgently. "Certainly," Mr. Moreau said. He fiddled with his phone for a few moments before handing it to Maggie. On the screen was a picture of a woman in her late 60s. Her grey hair would have made Albert Einstein's hair look neat. "Do you have a picture of her when she was younger? Like in her 20s or 30s? "Sorry, no," Mr. Moreau said. "No worries," Christopher said, his phone already out. "Stefanova with an F or a PH?" "F. Google to the rescue," he announced and showed Maggie. The woman in the picture was without a doubt the same Charlotte Maggie had met only a couple of weeks earlier, albeit dressed quite differently. She was wearing a white lab coat and seemed to be giving some kind of lecture. "It worked," Maggie whispered. "You made it." "Excuse me." Mr. Moreau looked at her. "Oh, nothing," Maggie said. "You said something about additional tests." "Well, they're more like control questions given to us by Dr. Stefanova. Bear in mind that she was quite eccentric and the questions don't really make any sense, but her will states quite clearly that unless you answer them correctly you get nothing." "So no pressure then," Maggie quipped. Mr. Moreau just stared at her with a blank expression. "Never mind." "What are the questions?" "Like I said, these questions doesn't really make any sense." Mr. Moreau tapped his phone a few times. "Okay, Dr. Stefanova's first question is, what color was the dress I wore when you last saw me?" "Pale yellow," Maggie said quickly. Mr. Moreau raised an eyebrow, but continued. "Number 2, which flower will I never draw again?" Maggie had a mental flash of the stack of Charlotte's drawings she had found. She shook her head to clear it. "Bluebells." "Interesting," Mr. Moreau said cryptically. "And last, who did we leave behind?" Maggie swallowed. "Maria and Jacob," she said quietly. Leaving them behind when Charlotte, Tommy and herself had weighed heavily on her. Mr. Moreau rose and put away his phone. "I have to check your answers with the sealed documents we have from Dr. Stefanova, but if they're correct, you'll be hearing from us." He turned and left before Maggie had a chance to say anything. "Well, that was weird," Christopher said when Mr. Moreau was gone. So how do you know her? I don't. Not really anyway. Look, it's complicated. Maggie didn't really want to tell Christopher about how she had met Charlotte. Partly because it had led her to need diapers at night for almost a week, but also because saying it out loud would make it sound even more insane than it already seemed in her mind. So what did you find out about her? Maggie pointed to Christopher's phone. Let's see, he said, and he scrolled down. Born in 1947. 3 PhDs, physics, biomechanical engineering, and computer engineering. She was one of those annoying child prodigies who is good at almost everything. Finished high school at 11. Apparently she had some kind of mental breakdown at Woodstock in '69 when she was 22. It says something about severe mental regression due to a bad acid trip. Apparently it took her years to recover. After that, she worked mostly on some of the more out there things. What do you mean out there? Science fiction-y, quantum physics stuff like parallel universes, time travel, and artificial intelligence. Obviously she didn't make any front-page advances. When did she die? Maggie felt a strange mix of feelings. Relief that Charlotte and probably also Tommy got back to their place in time, but also guilt and shame at having left Maria and Jacob behind when they escaped. It doesn't say. She just disappeared in 2010. Disappeared? That's what it says here. Christopher pointed to the screen of his phone. I guess she must have been declared dead. I mean, if they're looking up people in her will. I guess, Maggie said absent-mindedly. So how did you end up in her will? No way it's some kind of scholarship. Not with your grades. Look who's talking. Your grades are even worse than mine. Yeah, and that's why you love me, he said with a grin. But seriously, why would you be in the will of a mad scientist? Maggie sighed. It's kinda complicated. Yeah, you keep saying that. Look, can't this wait until I actually know if I inherit anything? The guy said he had to check to see if the answers were right. Oh come on, you didn't sound like you were guessing. You knew the answers. I said I didn't want to talk about it, Maggie snapped, suddenly feeling very annoyed with Christopher's curiosity. Fine. Christopher held up his hands. Geez, I was just curious. The rest of the lunch passed in an awkward silence. It was almost 2 weeks before Maggie heard back from the lawyers. She came home after a particularly hectic day to find an official-looking envelope in her mailbox. Despite the temptation to rip it open right there, Maggie left the envelope on the kitchen table while she made dinner. While the soup simmered, Maggie could no longer resist. She ripped the envelope open and extracted the single sheet of paper within. Despite the legalese, the letter was fairly straightforward. The lawyers said that her answers to the control questions were correct and that they wanted to meet with her to finalize matters. Maggie set a reminder on her phone to call them the next day before returning her attention to the soup. The meeting was more of a formality than anything else. The lawyers had Maggie sign some papers and then handed her a set of keys and a sealed envelope. They told her that Charlotte had left Maggie her house on the outskirts of town, with all its contents. Maggie wondered what they meant by that phrase and really hoped it didn't mean that it looked like the houses on those reality shows about compulsive hoarders. That thought almost made her miss the condition that Charlotte had set down. If Maggie wanted the house, she had to live there. Charlotte had also left her some money. Not a fortune, but enough for Maggie to finish her education with only one extra job. The house, Maggie asked the bored-looking lawyer she was meeting with, has it just been left all these years? Well, Dr. Stefanova's estate covered a cleaning and maintenance service and the basic utilities are up and running so you could theoretically move in already tomorrow. Of course, things like cable and internet have been disconnected so those might take a couple of days to get reactivated. The will stipulated you have to move in within 1 month and you have to live there for at least 1 year. Maggie nodded. Anything else I should know? Not really. Dr. Stefanova may have left you more information in that letter. The lawyer nodded towards the envelope. We will be checking that you're in compliance with the conditions of the will. But unless you have any other questions, our business is concluded. 60-year-old Charlotte's face filled the screen. Okay, this feels a little weird, she said. But if you're watching this, I've been declared dead. I'm guessing you have quite a few questions, so I'll try to give you some answers. First of all, how did I find you? Well, in 1996 I managed to track down Tommy. He was taken in 1990, by the way. Charlotte held up a photo. Despite the sickly appearance of the man in the picture, Maggie recognized Tommy. By the time I tracked him down, he was already terminally ill. He passed away a year later. But he knew enough that we could figure out you were from 2016 or 17. That, combined with your name and picture, Charlotte held up the sketch Mr. Moreau had shown Maggie, was obviously enough to find you. The image of Charlotte went unfocused as she leaned closer. When the camera had refocused, she held up the 2 thumb drives that Maggie now had. Now, what I want you to do is to leave the second flash drive alone for now. When you're settled in your new house, go down to the basement. The camera shifted to show a freezer in a dimly lit room. Under the floorboards next to the freezer is my laptop. You need to plug the second drive into that. That should give you all the answers you need. The screen went blank. Maggie stared at the screen. She replayed the file, looking for hidden clues, nothing. Maggie pulled out the flash drive and inserted the other one, but all she got was an error message saying that the drive had an unknown file system and couldn't be read. She closed the laptop and looked around her tiny flat. Doing a quick inventory, she figured she would only need a couple of big boxes in addition to her suitcase to pack up all her belongings. If the house really was okay, she could easily move in before the end of the month. The following weekend, Maggie enlisted Christopher's help and headed for the house. It took them more than an hour to get there. When they said it was on the outskirts of town, they forgot to mention that it was in the middle of the fucking forest, Christopher said as they finally turned off from the main road and drove down a gravel road between the trees. At least it'll be nice and quiet, Maggie said. Yeah. Nobody'll hear you scream when the insane axe murderer comes over. The nearest neighbor is what, half a kilometer away? Perfect for a mad scientist. Charlotte wasn't mad, Maggie said defensively. How do you know? You said you didn't know her. Maggie hesitated. Look, she just wouldn't be. We'll see. As they reached the 2-story house at the end of the road, a couple of floodlights snapped on and turned to shine directly on the car, following it the last few meters as it stopped. Yeah, cause that's not creepy at all. Christopher turned off the engine. I bet there's a lab with body parts in jars in the basement. Maggie just punched him in the arm before getting out of the car and marching up the stairs to the front door. The front door opened without the creaking hinges that Maggie half expected. Inside was a narrow hallway with stairs up on the right. The air smelled faintly of soap. Maggie stepped inside and switched on the lights. So, any mechanical horrors? Maggie jumped as Christopher came up behind her. She looked around. To her right, at the bottom of the stairs, was what looked like a closet, while on her left was a door with a small, red and white painted heart. She peeked inside and saw a small bathroom. Oh, you have to see this, Christopher called from further down the hallway. Maggie walked past what had to be the basement door to find Christopher in the kitchen. It was huge. There was a massive, steel fridge in one corner, a big gas stove, dishwasher, and enough cupboards and counter space to make a small restaurant feel jealous. Christopher was sitting on the edge of a dining table made from thick, smooth planks. It looked completely out of place in the otherwise high-tech kitchen. Can you believe the size of this place? It's almost as big as your entire apartment. Millimeter, Maggie said, running her hand over the smooth wood. The table seemed eerily familiar, but she couldn't place it. Next, They checked out the living room next to the kitchen. The walls were almost entirely covered with bookshelves. The books were everything from dense tomes on advanced physics to science fiction paperbacks. There were even a couple of comic books here and there. The only other furniture was a big, slightly worn sofa in one corner and a couple of easy chairs next to a small coffee table. Christopher opened a pair of cabinet doors, almost causing a small avalanche. Well, she didn't just read books. Here's a fat screen TV. He stepped aside to reveal an old TV set and a DVD player inside the cabinet. Maggie groaned at his pun and walked back out to the hallway. There was only 2 bedrooms and a large bathroom upstairs. They were all as mundane as the ground floor. You know how they always say he seemed so normal when they catch a serial killer with soup bowls made of skulls and bags of human jerky in their pantry? Christopher said as he opened the door under the stairs. Ready to descend into madness and see what kind of horror show you've inherited? Maggie blew a raspberry at him and walked down the stairs. Oh my God, Maggie exclaimed when she reached the bottom of the stairs. What? Christopher came running down the stairs. You're such a sucker, Maggie said and shook her head. The basement seemed perfectly normal too. There were shelves holding dusty cardboard boxes, a workbench and some tools along one of the walls and a big freezer under the stairs. In one corner was a pair of skis. Through an open door, Maggie could see the laundry room with a washing machine and a dryer. She had to stop herself from getting Charlotte's laptop right away. Finding the answers she wanted would just lead to more questions from Christopher. She needed to figure out how much of the truth she could tell him. Maggie walked across the room and looked nonchalantly through the door to the laundry room. Yeah, Chris. I don't think there's a hidden sex dungeon here. Fine, but it's still creepy, he said defensively. I don't know, I like it. I mean, it's nice and quiet. Nice and quiet? More like completely isolated. You're going to end up with stacks of papers all saying all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy over and over. Pfft. Maggie walked past Christopher and up the stairs. Please don't tell me you're seriously considering moving here, Christopher called after her. It's either that or lose it. I have to move in within a month and stay here for a year. It was in the will. Okay, but how are you going to get to school? I mean, it's not like there's a lot of buses here, and there's no way I'm picking you up every day. You could stay here too, Maggie suggested. I don't mean we move in together. There are 2 bedrooms here, after all, she quickly added. You're kidding, right? I like you and all, but there isn't a pizza place for miles. Maggie knew that pizza wasn't Christopher's problem. Living this far away from the city would severely cramp his dating style. And having Maggie as a not-quite roommate probably wouldn't help. Yeah, I guess, she conceded. They walked outside and Maggie locked the front door. At least you're not going to have to worry about buses, Christopher shouted. He was standing in the doorway of the shed next to the driveway. Maggie walked over and looked inside. It was a car, at least technically. It looked like the unholy offspring of a quad bike and a Mini Cooper. And it was Granny Smith apple green. At least you won't get any tickets in that thing, Christopher said. The cops'll be too busy laughing to stop you. I can see why they thought Dr. Stefanova was nuts. Oh, shut up. For some reason, Maggie still felt she had to protect Charlotte even if it was almost 50 years since she had been the scared little kid Maggie had met. Even so, she had to admit it was an ugly car. After making sure the car started, they checked out the garden behind the house. To be honest, it was less of a garden and more of a tiny, mossy lawn with a single row of strawberry plants along the wall of the house. Satisfied that she had checked out the house and that it was livable, Maggie and Christopher got back in the car and headed back to the city. You're moving already. Christopher looked at Maggie as if she had grown an extra head. What about your place? One word, sublet. Maggie grinned. She would actually make money on that arrangement. Look, you don't have to help. Anita and that creepy, Aryan-looking boyfriend of hers, what's his name? Maximilian, Christopher helped. Yeah, Maximum. Anita borrowed a van from work so we can get everything moved in one go. Maggie knew that would get him on board. She knew Christopher was convinced that Max wanted to get Maggie to join him and Anita in a threesome, and he was not going to let that happen. Of course, Maggie continued, it's not like we're a couple, so if you have other plans. Oh come on, what kind of friend would I be if I didn't help? Christopher said. 3 days later, Maggie's meager belongings were all packed into 5 big boxes in the back of Anita's van. Max, looking disturbingly like a grown-up version of Draco Malfoy from the Harry Potter movies, leaned against the side of the van, watching as Maggie and Christopher struggled with Maggie's big suitcase. It was too big to fit anywhere except in the back seat of Christopher's tiny car. Stop staring. Max got a backhanded slap on his arm from Anita and reluctantly turned to get in the car. Then they were off. A few hours later they were all gathered around the coffee table in Maggie's new living room, eating the traditional "we helped you move so now we get pizza." Max raised his beer bottle. Here's to Dr. Charlie for leaving such a nice little place to you, Maggie. Complete with serial killer neighbors, Christopher added. And a mutant lunchbox of a car, Anita chimed in and took a sip. And let's not forget the unstable electricity, Max concluded. Huh? The other 3 looked at him quizzically. Come on. Why else would there be that big generator-looking thing in the garage? Max made air quotes and almost dropped his bottle. The others thought about it for a moment before nodding. To shitty electricity. The toasts grew progressively sillier and stranger as the evening went on, and before long they had toasted the Gulf Stream and its contribution to the climate of Northern Europe, maple syrup, Dumbledore's glorious beard. Maggie insisted that Richard Harris Dumbledore was far superior to Michael Gambon's, the fall of the Roman Empire and last, but according to Christopher not least, the butt of the new psychology professor. The boys' competitive instincts quickly led them to trying to drink each other under the table and eventually they both lost. Anita and Maggie didn't waste any time posing the 2 boys in what looked like a passionate embrace on the sofa and then taking several pictures. For science, of course, Anita insisted. She squeezed in next to Maggie in the oversized chair on the opposite side of the coffee table. She swung her legs across Maggie's lap and giggled. Oh, Chris is going to so be pissed, Maggie said with a chuckle. But they look so cute, Anita said, a slight slur revealing how drunk she really was. The only thing missing is a dress. Huh? Maggie looked at Anita. Okay, shush. Anita put her finger to her lips in a drunkenly exaggerated display of telling Maggie to be quiet. You can't tell anybody this. Okay. Not anybody. Promise? Sure, Maggie agreed. I mean it. It's like super duper secret, Anita said emphatically. This is like one of those non-disqualify thingies. Maggie raised her hand. Scout's honor, she said seriously. Oh. You are a Girl Scout. Not really, Maggie admitted. But I buy their cookies. Ooh, I want cookies now. Do you have cookies? Anita looked towards the kitchen. When Maggie shook her head, she pouted theatrically. What was it you wanted to tell me? Something about a dress. Maggie reminded her. Oh yeah. Now you can't tell anybody this, Anita repeated. Yeah. I promise, Maggie said impatiently. Leaning closer, Anita whispered, if Max is really annoying, I make him wear a dress. Really? Maggie looked at Anita, then at Max and the back at Anita again. Yeah, she said with a snicker. And I call him Maxine. Oh, that's so sweet. Maggie giggled and drank the final sip of beer from her bottle. Maggie coughed and her last swallow of beer came out her nose. She wheezed and hiccuped as she fought for breath. Anita patted her back. You what? She finally managed to say as she tried to dry the beer and snot off Anita's legs. First, Anita waved her hands around mimicking something, I tie him up. And then, she nodded firmly. Then I fuck him senseless. Maggie just stared at Anita, suddenly seeing her friend in a whole new light. But you can't tell anyone, she said with a drunken seriousness and wagging her finger at Maggie. You promised. Anita snuggled closer. Now you have to tell me what you and Chris do, she murmured conspiratorially. It's like mutually assured description. Anita's drunken slur making the last words almost incomprehensible. No way I'm telling her about the diapers. Maggie smiled awkwardly. But we don't do anything like that, she finally said. Really? Anita sounded surprised and almost disappointed. Sorry. Oh. Don't be sorry. Anita stroked Maggie's cheek, her eyes quickly going more unfocused. You're real pretty, she slurred. If you were a guy, I'd put you in a dress and fuck you senseless too. Maggie smiled and took Anita's hand. And if you weren't so drunk, she whispered soothingly, I just might let you. I'm not drunk, Anita mumbled near incomprehensibly in protest. Shush. Of course you're not. Maggie gently stroked Anita's hair. Soon she was slumped against Maggie's shoulder, snoring softly. What a bunch of lightweights. Maggie slowly wriggled her way out from under Anita. She looked around the room at her sleeping friends before picking up the pizza boxes and a few of the empty bottles before unsteadily making her way to the kitchen. As she cleaned up, Maggie couldn't help thinking about the laptop that Charlotte had said was hidden under the floorboards in the basement. Her drunken buzz silenced the more sensible voice in the back of her mind that told her to wait until she was alone. Maggie silently sneaked towards the door to the basement and opened it. She cast a quick glance to the living room, but everybody there was still asleep. Then she flicked on the lights and went down the stairs. The basement smelled like dust and old books. Maggie looked at the floor next to the freezer, but couldn't see any secret hatch. Picking up a flashlight, she looked more closely, poking and prodding the floorboards until she found a small piece that was loose. Removing it revealed a finger-sized hole in the wood underneath. Maggie put a finger into the hole and easily lifted a small section of the floor up. In the small space underneath was a dusty nylon laptop bag. Maggie lifted it out and put it on the floor next to the hole before leaning down to see if there was anything else hidden under the floorboards. She found nothing but dust. At least there aren't any skeletons hidden under there. Maggie put the piece of floor back and brushed the dust off the laptop bag before carrying it up the stairs to the kitchen. She spread an old newspaper on the kitchen table before placing the laptop bag on top and unzipping it. Maggie wasn't quite sure what she expected from a 7-year-old laptop, but what she found was definitely not it. It was a small, cheap-looking laptop. The dark blue plastic casing had an unfamiliar silver logo and a strip of tape with CS written on it. Maggie opened it and saw nothing out of the ordinary. It had a small keyboard and a touchpad, just as expected. The only odd thing was the row of 3 USB ports just above the keyboard. Maggie held her breath, feeling almost like a kid on an adventure, and pressed the power button. Nothing happened. She pressed it again, but the screen remained dark and none of the indicator lights lit up. Maggie pressed several random buttons, hoping for a reaction, but the computer still did nothing. Then she realized that after 7 years, the battery was probably dead. She looked in the bag and brought out a charging cable and was about to plug it into the wall next to the table when she hesitated. If I leave it here to charge, the others might find it when they wake up. Maggie picked up the bag, charger and laptop and tiptoed upstairs. She plugged the computer into the wall next to the bed in the bedroom. A small red indicator started blinking. Maggie sat down in front of the laptop and tried turning it on again. The screen only said, charging, 0%. Estimated. 5 hours 21 minutes left. There were no signs of the computer booting up. as she watched the 0.0% change to 0.1%. Okay, this is going to take a while. Maggie closed the lid and sat down on the bed. She couldn't quite decide whether this was anticlimactic, or if it made her even more curious. Or maybe just tired. Maggie yawned and pulled a blanket around herself while she stared at the hypnotically blinking light. Maggie wasn't sure how long she sat before falling asleep, but when she woke up, it was light outside. The clouds were dark grey and looked heavy with rain. She could hear somebody moving around downstairs and stood. Still wrapped in the blanket, she walked down the stairs to see who else was awake. Anita was sitting by the kitchen table, nursing a big, steaming mug of coffee. She looked up when she heard Maggie and nodded weakly. "You look like shit," Maggie said as she picked her favorite mug out of the cardboard box on the kitchen counter. "I feel like shit," Anita said, taking another sip of coffee. "Remind me to never mix that stuff with beer again." She pointed at the empty bottle of tequila on the kitchen counter. Maggie filled her mug with coffee and sat down next to Anita. For a while they just sat there silently, drinking their coffee. "Did I do something stupid last night?" Anita uneasily. "I think I might have, but I'm not sure. It's all kinda hazy." Maggie couldn't help smiling. "Well, you did say that you would have slept with me if I were a guy." "Oh God," Anita groaned. Maggie's grin widened. "I think your exact words were that you would fuck me senseless." Anita cringed and looked like she wanted to crawl inside her coffee cup and hide. Just as she took another sip, Maggie decided to go for the kill. "Just like Maxine," she added. That got her the reaction she was expecting. Luckily, most of the sprayed coffee hit the newspaper still spread out on the table. Anita coughed and sputtered. "What? How? She was red-faced and teary-eyed. "Oh, don't worry." Maggie patted her hand. "Your secret's safe with me." She winked conspiratorially and rose. "And the next time you're staying over, just let me know if you need to borrow some extra rope." Anita just hid her furiously blushing face in her arms as Maggie started making breakfast. While Maggie made breakfast, the boys woke up. Christopher came to the kitchen and sat down at the table, bleary-eyed and quiet. Max just shuffled past the kitchen to the bathroom. Maggie wasn't sure, but she thought she could hear retching sounds almost being drowned out by the sound of the fan over the stove. "Good morning," she said cheerfully as she cracked some eggs into the frying pan. "Did you two sleep well?" Christopher just gave Maggie a withering look in reply. "Oh come on," she teased. "You look so adorable there on the sofa. I'll show you the pictures later." "You didn't." Maggie just grinned and Christopher let his head fall forward until his forehead rested against the table. "Oh, go get cleaned up. I'm making you guys a proper breakfast." Anita left her mug on the table and slowly made her way up the stairs. A minute or two later, Maggie and Christopher could hear the shower start. "You know, it's not funny," Christopher complained as Maggie looked through the cupboards for plates and putting them on the table. "It's a little bit funny," Maggie replied and wrinkled her nose. "Especially now," she added quietly. "What?" Christopher looked up from the cup of coffee Maggie put in front of him. "Oh, nothing." After breakfast, and the appropriate amount of teasing and embarrassing photos, Anita, Max, and Christopher left. Maggie finished her coffee and then she retrieved the laptop from her bedroom. She put it on the kitchen table and pressed the power button. The screen lit up with what looked like a bunch of system checks. One by one they finished, and when the final one flashed a green OK, the words "Insert key to continue" appeared. "I guess that's the thumb drive," Maggie said to the empty room. She pulled the two thumb drives out of a pocket on her backpack and plugged the second one into the computer. There was a beep and words on the screen changed to reading, and then to connecting. Connecting to what? The screen flickered and the text was replaced with the image of a room filled with bookshelves. The floor was covered by a deep red carpet and in a corner was an unlit fireplace. Sitting in one of the old-fashioned wing chairs was a young Charlotte wearing a baggy tracksuit and reading a book. Call screensaver. I wonder where it is. Just then, Charlotte put down the book and looked right at the camera. Well, it certainly took you long enough, she said. Maggie just stared at the screen, waiting for whatever would come next. Finally, Charlotte rose from the chair and walked towards the camera. Geez, she said. I thought I had the volume fixed. She held up a finger and bent down towards something below the camera. Next she held up a piece of paper saying, "Turn up the volume." Charlotte mimed talking and waving her hands between her mouth and ears. Stupid volume controls, she grumbled. I know I should have fixed them myself. Maggie chuckled. Oh, so you can hear me? Charlotte asked suddenly, startling Maggie a little. Well, don't just sit there like an idiot. Hello. Charlotte tapped a finger on the lens. You know it's really rude to just ignore me like that. After a few moments of hesitation, Charlotte sighed. Fine. Baby steps it is. She took a few steps away from the camera until she was standing in the middle of the room. This, Charlotte gestured around herself, is not a recording. It's live. Just as live as you sitting in my kitchen, well, yours now, wearing a t-shirt with a Move your arms. I can't see properly. Without thinking about it, Maggie moved her arms. Thanks. With a Superman logo on. Supergirl, Maggie corrected without thinking about it. Fine, Supergirl logo then, Charlotte said. Wait, what? How can you see that? Duh. Charlotte rolled her eyes. Webcam. I mean, this isn't a video. Finally it sinks in. Charlotte sighed exasperatedly. No. Like I said. This isn't a video. It's live. Well, sort of. But they said you were, you know, dead. Maggie's head reeled and had trouble finding the right words. Yeah. And old too. Although I don't look too bad for a 70-year-old, do I? How? Look, it's easier to show you. Bring the laptop downstairs to the basement. Maggie picked up the computer and carried it down the stairs. Now what? She asked, looking around. Press Shift, Alt and Home at the same time, then type in 663, Carlotta said. Maggie put the computer on top of the freezer and pressed the buttons. A small window opened on the screen and she entered the numbers. There was a loud thunk and the freezer rose a little and swiveled to the side to reveal a metal hatch in the floor. As Maggie watched, it silently opened and lights flickered on, illuminating a narrow metal staircase going down. And down we go, Charlotte said cheerfully. Maggie made her way down the stairs. At the bottom, she could see 2 doors. One of them silently slid open. Go on, you're going to get a kick out of this. The room on the other side of the door was warm and when the lights flickered on, Maggie saw a white, tiled floor and plain white walls. There was a waist-high platform covered with the same tiles as the floor in one corner and in the middle of the room a softly glowing sphere the size of a tennis ball hung in mid-air. Maggie reached out to touch the ball. It was a bizarre sensation. She could feel her fingers hitting something, but she couldn't feel any surface or temperature or anything else. It was like the ball both was, and wasn't there at the same time. What the hell is it? Maggie backed away from the sphere. I honestly don't know. I know what it does though. And that is, in layman's terms, it bends the laws of physics. What do you mean? It makes things that shouldn't normally be possible. It sort of sucks up the normal around it. It seriously skews the odds in your favor. Roll a die and it'll roll a 6 1/6 of the time. Not here. I tried it. I got 37 sixes in a row. Twice. Do you know the odds of that happening? Pretty astronomical. Exactly. So the old transhumanist pipe dream of uploading a brain to a computer. It actually worked. Okay, so your brain is in this computer. Maggie tapped the laptop. Don't be silly, Charlotte replied and laughed. There's a mainframe in the other room down here. The laptop is just to make it easier to talk to you. Maggie backed out of the room. This is Nobel Prize level stuff, she said. Why hide it? Charlotte shrugged. Several reasons. First, I'm just an old crackpot. Second, it's impossible to measure this thing. Every instrument I've tried insists that it's not there. And third, would you trust the governments of the world with this? She raised her eyebrows. I see your point, Maggie admitted. So, what's this all about? Charlotte looked around her virtual library awkwardly. Yeah, about that. I was kind of hoping you'd go along with something a little, well, strange. Stranger than having a brain trapped in a computer in a hidden basement under my freezer. Maggie asked with a smirk. Okay, that's a fair point, Charlotte admitted. Anyway, I was hoping you wouldn't mind having a roommate. Other than you living in a computer in the basement, you mean? Kind of. You'd be able to see me and talk to me without the laptop. And how do we do that? Do I have to wear like those big VR goggles? Not quite. All you have to do is take a pill. A pill? Look over on the table. Charlotte said. On the platform was a small, white plastic box that Maggie hadn't noticed before. She put the laptop down and opened the box. Inside was a red pill and a blue pill. Maggie rolled her eyes. You saw the Matrix, didn't you? On the screen, Charlotte grinned impishly. Come on, can you blame me, she said. So let me guess. You want me to take the red pill? Yep. Charlotte snapped her fingers and a pair of mirrored sunglasses appeared. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Meaning? You know what nanobots are, right? Oh yeah, they're like transformers that turn into little insects. Precisely, and they dash. Charlotte stopped abruptly as Maggie's answer registered. No. They're not transformers. They're microscopic robots that dash. I'm kidding, Maggie interrupted. I know what nanets are. I read science fiction. Charlotte sighed. Anyway, it contains a bunch of nanets that basically tweak your sensory system so it can pick up signals from the little transmitters all over the house. So I'll see you even if you're not really there? Sounds a bit weird. Maggie picked up the blue pill and examined it. And this one? Charlotte took off the sunglasses again. It reverses the effect of the red pill. And this is all safe, right? Perfectly safe. Anywhere else, it probably wouldn't even work, but the normal sucker. Maggie nodded. Throwing caution to the wind, Maggie popped the red pill in her mouth and swallowed. Oh, the pill also contains an extremely fast-acting sedative, so you probably want to lie down. Sedative? Why? We're rewriting your sensory system. Being unconscious is probably a good idea. Good point, Maggie said. The world was already beginning to go a little fuzzy along the edges and her knees felt a little wobbly. She crawled onto the platform and closed her eyes. The first thing Maggie noticed when she woke up was the sound of rain. It reminded her of autumn days when she was a girl. She would hide under her desk in her little fortress to read or play video games. The next thing she noticed was not quite as pleasant as those memories. She had wet herself. And it wasn't just a little slip-up, it was a first night back after Liza's complete flooding. Damn it, Maggie groaned. She tried to sit up, but her entire body felt like it was made of lead. Don't try to get up. Maggie turned towards the voice and saw it was coming from the laptop. I'm wet, Maggie whispered, feeling a rush of shame at her loss of control. Yes, I know. Charlotte looked everywhere except the camera. Why? It's been weeks since. Yeah, about that. The nanets didn't work. Charlotte gave an embarrassed chuckle. I guess 38 Sissys was just one too many. But don't worry. It should be easily fixable. So it's not because of, Maggie paused. Eliza. Charlotte shook her head. I doubt it. You weren't there long enough to have any long-term effects. I needed diapers at night for more than a week afterwards, Maggie pointed out. Charlotte leaned closer to the camera and whispered, 24/7, for 41 years. So you can fix this? Oh yeah. Charlotte waved her hand dismissively. It'll just take me a little time to reprogram the little buggers. I guess we're going to have to use goggles. At least for now. Do you have any lying around? Charlotte shook her head. No, but I ordered some online while you were out. They should be here the day after tomorrow. Charlotte sat back down in her chair. In the meantime, you should probably get changed. Yeah. Maggie scooted to the edge of the platform and carefully slid off, standing on wobbly legs. What about the mess here? She asked and nodded towards the small puddle on the platform. Don't worry about it. I have a couple of souped-up Roombas that handle cleaning down here. They're way more thorough than I ever was. Maggie picked up the laptop and walked bow-legged up the stairs. When she arrived in her bedroom, and put the laptop down, she was a little startled to see that the library had changed into a copy of her bedroom complete with a translucent copy of herself holding the laptop. What? Maggie started. I said there were transmitters and cameras all over the house, she explained. Okay, but if this is going to work, we need to have some ground rules. Maggie bent down to rummage through the box where she had what was left of the package of diapers she had had to buy after returning from Eliza's house. First, this is my room. You can't just be in here uninvited. Maggie found what she was looking for and pulled a diaper out of the plastic bag before putting the rest next to her bed. And that includes peeking. Maggie could have sworn that Charlotte looked disappointed that she remembered that. Oh, and that goes for the bathroom too, Maggie added before closing the lid of the laptop. After a quick shower, Maggie put on the diaper and wrapped herself in a bathrobe before walking back down to the basement to put her clothes in the washing machine. The machine was easy enough to figure out, so Maggie threw in some extra laundry to fill it up and turned it on. Going back upstairs, she opened the laptop again and found Charlotte lounging on the living room sofa reading a book. Feel better? Charlotte asked. I guess, Maggie said. She sat down at the other end of the sofa and jumped a little at the unfamiliar sensation of extra padding on her butt. It took her a little extra fidgeting before she was comfortable. She looked at the screen and then at the empty seat on the sofa that wasn't empty on the screen. Okay, considering I have a brain in a computer and a normal sucker in a hidden lab under my freezer, and my entire house is more or less going to be the holodeck from Star Trek, I just have to ask, the car. What's up with the car? My little, green Isetta. Nice, isn't it? Charlotte smiled. Is it a flying car? Please tell me it flies. Sorry. But it does get great mileage. Maggie sighed with disappointment. Then she felt a sudden rush of worry as she thought she had wet herself again, but after discreetly checking she found that it was a false alarm. So, any more rules? Charlotte asked when she saw she had Maggie's attention again. I'm guessing you can control things like lights and stuff like that, right? Charlotte nodded. Okay, no messing with any guests I might have. So no playing ghost. Unless you say it's okay. Charlotte smiled mischievously. Yeah, I guess. Well, that all sounds reasonable, so I guess we have a deal. Charlotte lay down, her head on Maggie's lap. Now, I know you said that your bedroom was private, but what if Mr. Bear has a nightmare? A worn teddy bear appeared in Charlotte's hands. Can we come sleep in your bed with you then? Charlotte turned to look at the camera with big puppy eyes and for a moment, Maggie saw the scared little girl she had met at Eliza's house. Oh man, that place really fucked her up. She wanted to pull Charlotte onto her lap, wrap her arms around her and comfort her. Of course, Charlie. Thank you, Charlotte whispered and snuggled closer to the virtual Maggie. Maggie smiled and tried to make her copy stroke Charlotte's hair. She thought she could almost feel the weight of Charlotte's head on her lap.